Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bet Right Sports Betting Podcast presented by the Six Pack Coverage Media Network. It's your host, Jeff Farrell, here with my co-host, Andrew Tanzi, coming at you on a Sunday night. It is currently July 10th here. This episode will be in your podcast feeds later this week, but today we're going to break down the NFC North part 2 of our division-by-division breakdown. We got all our futures bets going through each team, so today we're going to talk the Packers, Vikings, Lions, and Bears. I have a strong inclination that there may be some heated debates in this division. I think we are on opposite sides of a couple teams, but we'll save that for when we get into the actual teams themselves later in the show. So, Rue, how you doing today?
Good, man. As the weeks go by, I'm just getting more and more excited for the season. It's great to be talking some NFL, but man, it cannot come soon enough.
I know I saw your text come through yesterday afternoon, just like I need football, and I was like, "Oh, we're getting close, but we're still kind of got some time to waste." All right, NFC North. Do you have any like overarching takes on this division? Anything that stands out to you as a whole?
I mean, my overarching take is that the top team, the Green Bay Packers, is grossly mispriced in the division. You know, we'll dive more into it. Yeah, we'll dive more into it as we get into each team. But I just think they're way too overpriced.
Okay, kind of ties into my only take on the division too. Is this the year that the Packers finally fall off? They've won the division 3 years in a row and 8 of the last 11 years. So, you know, since Aaron Rodgers has really taken over at quarterback, they pretty much dominated all the other teams in this division. So could this be the beginning of the end for Aaron Rodgers, or is it going to be similar to last season where everyone wondered that and then they just stomped on everybody and won the division easily again? So we'll see. All right, we ready to get into each team here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's start with the aforementioned Green Bay Packers. They are the kings of the NFC North, won the division last year. Like I said, win total is set at 11. The over and the under both minus 110 right now. That's on DraftKings. You might find different prices a little bit on different books. Currently minus 500 to make the playoffs and a hefty minus 190 to win the NFC North. So as Rue hinted at, they are the overwhelming favorites here. Some notable offseason acquisitions and departures. They added Sammy Watkins in the passing game. I don't know if you can call that notable, but they added him. They drafted a couple guys from Georgia, linebacker Quay Walker and defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt. And then they also added a wide receiver out of North Dakota State, Christian Watson. Some notable departures. Devontae Adams and Marquez Valdez-Scantling both leave the receiving corps. Zadarius Smith on the defensive line, Billy Turner on the offensive line. And then they do have tight end Robert Tonyan. He tore his ACL week 8 of last season. So I believe there was a report out of Green Bay that he just started running this past week. And it sounds like he's kind of questionable for the start of the season, but it sounds like they'll have him back for at least the majority of this year. So how are you feeling about the Green Bay Packers? It sounds like you're going to be pretty down on them this year. What are you thinking for them coming into the season?
So I'm not down on them to the standpoint where I think they're going to be a bad team. I just think them being,
their floor is just so high with Rodgers. Like a bad season would be like 9 wins. Like
exactly. So when I say they're grossly mispriced, I'm not saying they're going to go 8-9 or something like that. I just think that the Vikings have closed the gap enough to where minus 170 for the Packers or in that range is just far too much in my opinion. You know, and I know the Packers have been solid without Devontae Adams, a 10-3 record. Rodgers has good numbers, but over the course of an entire season, I think it's different than missing Adams for a game or two here and there over the years. And MVS is also a big loss. I mean, he was their big stretch the field guy. So now you have Sammy Watkins, who hasn't played a full season since his rookie year. Allen Lazard is we don't really know who the number one target is, but Rodgers and Lazard had pretty good chemistry together last year. He's a big body. Like I said, he has rapport, but you know, if he's going to be drawing the number one corner from opposing teams throughout the season, I don't know that I like that much. And then that leaves us with Randall Cobb and a rookie wide receiver from North Dakota State. So
32-year-old Randall Cobb, who looked like he had already lost a step last season. So, I mean, he's not going to be able to do much this year.
On top of that, you have both offensive tackles coming off ACL injuries. Bakhtiari played, Bakhtiari did not play in the playoffs. So he played like week 17 or 18, correct?
He definitely came back towards the end of the year. Yeah, I can't remember if something weird happened in the playoff game. He like played week 18, but then couldn't play the next week. It was something weird.
I think that was the case. So you have him that played one game last year. But honestly, the strength of this team, I think, remember that Cardinals game last year where they played without Adams and it was just,
I remember it.
Pound AJ Dillon. We're going to just run the ball, run the play clock down. So
remember when you bet the Cardinals in that game and I bet the Packers?
Yes, I do. I do remember that. Yes. So it might be kind of a shift in what we see from this Packers team. Maybe they become that run team, defensive, strong. Like their defense, I think, will be good. You know, they have a solid unit. Like you said, Jair Alexander's coming back. They were brutal against the run last year, but they kind of revamped that defensive line. Devontae Wyatt, Jerron Reed, Rashawn Gary took a big leap forward last year. So I think that the defense will be the strength of this team. And again, like you said, they do have a floor on offense with Rodgers, but this is a team that struggled in the red zone and on third down last year consistently throughout the season. We saw it in the playoff game as well. So now you're without Devontae Adams, who's your best situational guy in those situations. So best situational guy in those situations, best third down red zone target. So it's going to be interesting to see how this offense pans out. And if Watkins does go down at some point throughout the season, I don't know. I feel like we've just been waiting the entire offseason for the Packers to make some type of move and bring in another wide receiver, and it hasn't really happened. So from a betting standpoint, I don't have any bets over or under on the Packers, but I'm going to attack the Vikings because of, as a way to kind of fade the Packers.
Yeah, so a couple notes that I have. So they have their schedule is kind of like middle of the pack. I think they're the 15th hardest schedule. They do have a -12 net rest advantage, which is the worst in the NFL. So that's basically two teams are playing each other. If one team's coming off a bye, the other one's coming off a regular week, then you would get the net rest advantage would be +7 for the team coming off a bye. So they do have some rest disadvantage spots. I think when I look at this offense, I think Aaron Jones has to be the key to them succeeding without Devontae Adams and MVS. I think if they can really kind of transform him into more of like a do-it-all running back wide receiver combo, kind of like a Deebo Samuel or an Alvin Kamara, like I think if you can put him and AJ Dillon on the field at the same time, Jones has demonstrated that he's one of the best receiving backs in the league. If you can start to split him out wide, get him screen passes, get him in space, and he has massive differences in his splits in his career with and without Devontae Adams. So with Adams on the field, 59 career games, he only averages 18 receiving yards per game. Without Devontae Adams, he averages 49 receiving yards per game. So we're seeing a massive difference there. So I think LaFleur knows this. He's obviously put it into the game plan before. So I think Aaron Jones is really the key to this offense. If they can kind of create tons of space and motion with him, I think that can help sort of replace that void that Devontae Adams is leaving. So I'm looking for Aaron Jones to have a really big year. And I do think that like Aaron Rodgers can turn just about any wide receiver into a pretty good NFL player just because he's that talented. So I didn't bet anything on the Packers over or under. I think I might actually have a small ticket on them to win the division from early in the offseason at like -150. But I agree with you. I think at the current price is -180, -190. I definitely wouldn't be laying that. So I think the win total is fine. I wouldn't really bet it either way.
And the other thing about their schedule, I mean, you look up and down the schedule, there are some trappy kind of games scattered throughout here. I mean, you got going to Detroit game in week 9 that's sandwiched between a Buffalo and Dallas game after playing in Buffalo. You have, a week 16 game at Miami, which Miami is always a tougher place to travel to before a big Vikings game, which I'm sure will have some, big implications late in the year. You have a London game where they don't get a bye week afterwards, where they're playing the Giants in week 5. They're playing the Jets after, but it's still a lot of traveling without a bye week. So it is
one of the only teams in the league with 3 road games in a row.
Yeah, and the London game is the one that's sandwiched in the middle there. So, but by no means is it an easy setup schedule for them.
Yeah, I agree. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, like I said, I think that the floor of this team is really 9 or 10 games. So could the Vikings get over that? I guess so. But I do think that it's very stable and like the Packers are going to make the playoffs. So unless Rodgers gets hurt.
And Robert Tonyan, did you talk about him? He's not going to be to start the season, right? He got hurt late last year.
So the update that I found, he tore his ACL week 8 of last season. He just started running this past week. He's currently listed as questionable for the start of the season. Sounds like it'll probably be more like weeks 3 to 4 that he comes back. So he'll be there for the most of the season, but I don't know if he'll be full go by week 1.
Yeah, so the offense is the big question mark. Like I said, I expect the defense to be pretty solid, but with Bakhtiari coming off an ACL, Jenkins coming off an ACL, Tunyon coming off an ACL, Watkins bound to get hurt. There's just not enough depth at the skill positions outside of running back. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Rodgers does because I feel like he's always kind of had that number one target to lean on.
Hypothetical. So not that there's a ton of big name wide receivers, or I mean, I guess there are big names, but they're not really impactful players at this point in their careers. But if they did sign a Will Fuller, a Julio Jones, pick anyone else that you think can make an impact off the street, if they did sign a guy like that before the season, would that really change your impact? Or do you think at this point in their career, I mean, I guess in Julio's career, Will Fuller's just more of like a wild card at this point. I don't even know
you just named two guys who probably have like a 12% chance of playing an entire season without getting hurt.
But they give them some depth. Even if Julio plays 8 games, like would that change anything for you, or is there really no one that's impactful left?
Yeah, I mean, not enough to where I'd change my entire opinion on them, but because I mean, you bring in Julio, that's still not a Devontae Adams. Like at this point in his career,
right? It wouldn't hurt, but it's not. Really
it adds a little more depth. Yeah, it adds a little more depth, but yeah, it's just scary. I mean, you think, like I said, hypothetically, Sammy Watkins gets hurt like he's done every year, then you're left with they drafted this rookie wide receiver, but he's from North Dakota State. It's not like he's coming out of a top tier SEC school or something. So yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't think it would change my betting standpoint on them. No, I don't. If they brought in one of those guys, they need like a big name guy, which, like you said, there's really not much left out there.
Right. They're not going to pull a blockbuster trade for someone like that now.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings then. They are the currently second ranked team in the NFC North. Their win total is at 9. The over is -115, unders -105. They're around even money to make the playoffs, and they are +265 to the division. So you can get pretty decent odds on them to win the NFC North. So some coaching changes in the offseason for the Vikings. Mike Zimmer, the longtime coach, is gone. Kevin O'Connell, former Rams offensive coordinator, clapping for.
Yeah, clapping that Mike Zimmer's gone.
Okay, fair enough. So the former Rams offensive coordinator will take over as head coach. He also brought over Wes Phillips from the Rams staff as well to be the offensive coordinator. And then Ed Donatel, former Broncos D coordinator, will take over in that role for the Minnesota Vikings. Off-season moves, they added Zadarius Smith from the Packers, also added linebacker Jordan Hicks, drafted safety Lewis Seen, cornerback Andrew Booth. Looked like they made a clear focus on trying to upgrade the defense. They did lose safety Xavier Woods and tight end Tyler Conklin. So I guess some positives on the offseason. I would say they added more talent than they lost. How are you feeling about the Minnesota Vikings coming into this season? I could just go ahead. I can't.
The 2022 NFL season, you will refer to them as my Minnesota Vikings.
Okay.
All these bets, whatever you just said, the division, the wins, the playoffs, I bet all of them because these prices are just outrageous. 8.5 wins. Please, that's what they're 9 now. I got them at 8.5. I bet
there are books that still have 8.5, but the juice is a little bit higher. So,
all right, I bet them at plus money to win the playoffs, and I bet them at plus 300 to win the division. Look, Mike Zimmer being out is what this team needed. Similarly to how I said the Giants just get that huge culture change. The Vikings are getting the same thing, except they have more talent on their roster. They're a better team than the Giants. I think bringing in a younger offensive-minded head coach is going to be able to unlock the potential in this offense that we've seen. They have great skill position guys with Cook, Jefferson, Thielen. Kirk Cousins, who everyone loves to hate on. Yes, he has a bad primetime record, but this dude, you can say what you want. He's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. His stats.
He's not top 10.
His stats prove it,
Give me a break.
The last
top 10 quarterback.
Last 3 seasons, top 10 in DVOA for quarterbacks, top 10 in yards per attempt, top 10 in touchdown passes, top 10 in QB rating. You can say what you want. The guy is a top 10 quarterback.
He's not a top 10 quarterback.
Okay. All right. Defensively, like you said, I mean, they brought in Zadarius Smith. If him and Daniil Hunter can stay healthy on the defensive line, I think that'll be a scary pass rush coming off each edge. Question marks in the secondary. I know they had brought in a couple guys, drafted a corner. You do have the age of Patrick Peterson and Harrison
32.
Smith back there. A little bit of a concern, but I think they'll be good enough. I really am expecting this offense to come in and have much more consistency. Last year was just 15 of 17 games were one possession games. All 8 losses with Kirk Cousins in the lineup were a one possession. Cousins missed that week 17 game in Green Bay, which basically ended their season, which was a shame. And they've played the Packers
before that.
They've played the Packers competitively over the past few years. I just think that with the upgrades, look, the Packers have a better defense. I agree, but I think this offense will be better than Green Bay's. I don't know. You were a little lower on Green Bay than I expected. I was going to challenge you to a season-long bet between the Vikings and Packers, but you seemed like you were a little low on the Packers offense.
Give me that all. What's the?
I was going to say total points. Just me.
Oh, total points scored on offense.
Yeah, Vikings versus Packers. I was going to see if you wanted to do a little head-to-head bet here.
I would do it. I say that's pretty close.
Okay.
I'm higher on the Vikings and the Packers as a team, but on offense, I do agree. I think that's definitely a lot closer. But yeah, I would take that.
All right. So we'll go head-to-head season. We'll put an injury clause in there. We'll have to come to obviously if Cousins or Rodgers gets hurt, we'll write up the contract off the air, but
for sure
we'll have the season.
All our bets are signed by official contracts. In the presence of an attorney. Yeah. All that.
But can we agree that plus 300?
I'm not agreeing on anything you're saying. Okay, that's fine.
Come on. Like,
I don't see it.
First of all, let's talk about the regression. Just losing all these one-score games. Like,
let me tell you.
Let me talk about other stuff too. It was just
let's keep going. Get it all out.
Because it was like mistakes they made and the things that it was just everything just happened at the worst time. It was all poorly timed. It's like the sack comes at the worst time. The penalty comes at the worst. Like it was just a bunch. Look, I'm not saying it was all bad luck. I'm just saying luck. There's a luck aspect in football, and everything was just poorly timed. Capped off with Cousins getting COVID for that Week 17 game. It just wasn't their year. And Mike Zimmer. We hated on this guy all last season. I mean, he was a dinosaur in his coaching. They needed this new, like I said, a younger guy, offensive-minded head coach. I think it's just going to be an entire new look on this offensive or on the offensive side of the ball. And I expect this team to be a top 8 offensive unit this season.
Okay, you done yet? Did you get it all out so I can present the opposite case?
And Packers Vikings Week 1 will be fun.
That will be a very fun game.
Yes.
I think it's currently Packers are a 2-point road favorite. Don't have a bet on that game yet.
No, I think the Packers are home.
No, they'd be.
Oh no, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
Okay, here's why I believe the Vikings are overrated heading into this season. I don't think they could win. Look, the price on the division's fine. I just don't think they have enough of a ceiling to win it. I think 9 wins is the ceiling for this Vikings team, and it's the floor for the Packers team. The Vikings have the hardest schedule in this division. They have the 16th hardest schedule, just behind the Packers, but it is harder. That's not good. They're essentially running back the exact same team from the last 2 seasons. Yes, I know they have a different coaching staff, but this amazing offense that you've talked about has led to a 7-9 record in 2020 and an 8-9 record in 2021. You think Kirk Cousins is a top 10 quarterback. I think he's an average quarterback, and that's why the team has been average ever since he's gotten there. They have an average record. They go 8-8 every single year pretty much. Mike Zimmer, as much as we want to bank on him for being a bad offensive coach, he's a defensive mind. That's what he's done his whole career. This defense was ranked 16th in the league last year. Now they bring in an offensive coach, which isn't going to help that. They're horrible in the trenches. Last year, they were 24th in DVOA on the offensive line. Their defensive line, despite being number 2 in the NFL in sacks, which I would argue is a bit fluky, was 32nd in adjusted line yards. And you already mentioned the secondary. Their top 2 corners right now are 3rd-round pick from 2020, Cameron Dantzler, and a 32-year-old Patrick Peterson, who's a pulled hamstring waiting to happen. I think this team's going to do what they've done every year for the last whatever years, and they're going to win 7, 8, or 9 games. And I just don't see the ceiling outcomes that you do. I think the floor for the Packers is 9, and the ceiling for the Vikings is 9. So best case, you push on the win total and you tie in the division.
All right. So offensively, last year, the Vikings averaged 25 points per game. The Packers 25.6. So they're like both right there.
They're close.
The Packers just lost their best offensive weapon.
Yeah, for sure.
So, that to me, and, now the Vikings – they're returning Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Kirk. Like they have their team back. They arguably will have a they have a better offensive coach in there now, coming from the Rams and Sean McVay, who I'm sure this is going to be an entire new offense. And
the offense is going to be good. I just don't think they're good enough. And the one thing I also wanted to say about the 1-score games, you keep bringing up all these losses by 1 score, but you're not mentioning the wins that they had by 1 score. In 1-score games last year, they went 6-8. So they were slightly below 500, just like they were the entire season. There's no regression there. That's just who they were as a team. It's not like they went 0-10 in 1-score games and they're going to go back to 500. They went 6-8 and then the record was 8-9. That makes sense. They were just below 500 in 1-score games because they were just below a 500 team. That's what they were.
No,
they won some close games.
I am saying they're better than a 500 team. So when you're better than a 500 team, the regression standpoint in those 1-score games, you're going to win more.
Based on what? They're not. They've been a 500 team for 3 years in a row. How are they better than that?
I mean, you look at the first game of the season last year against the Bengals. They lose because their kicker misses a 30-yard field goal. I mean, they had some.
Yeah, I'm sure there were some games they won based on luck. I can't remember any off the top of my head, but there was at least one against the Lions where they literally handed them the games. They fumbled or something.
No, they lost to the Lions actually.
I think they won one insane finish, and then they lost one insane finish too.
All right, let me just. One more point here, and you're going to hate this, but
I swear to God, if you bring up some trend about a team that
no, it's not a trend.
It's purple colors.
It's
or
a
some
statistic.
BS.
There are statistics on Football Outsiders that, and look, this is just.
Is this a code name
for a trend?
Food
for thought. The Packers last year, since this is basically we can both agree the Bears or Lions aren't winning this division. This is Packers versus Vikings. The Packers won 13 games last year. So there are 2 statistics provided by Football Outsiders. One is estimated wins, basically based on consistency from a DVOA perspective.
Yeah, I already know Aaron Rodgers is too good. He breaks the statistic. They've said this about the Packers for 6 straight years, and they're wrong because Aaron Rodgers is too good. I already know. But go ahead.
All right, well, 10.8 wins. That was their estimated win. So they won 13. So almost 2 full games less than estimated wins. Pythagorean wins is based on your total points scored and total points allowed. That was 10.5 wins. So what that is basically saying, to dumb it down, is they overperformed based on where their statistics were.
What it's saying is Aaron Rodgers is an amazing quarterback in the clutch. So when it's 31-31 with 30 seconds left in the game, Kirk Cousins throws an interception and Aaron Rodgers throws a touchdown. That's the difference between these 2 teams. That's why one team wins every 1-score game and the other team's going to lose them. And that's why the Packers are going to win the division and the Vikings aren't, because Aaron Rodgers is just a better quarterback and he breaks those statistics and Kirk Cousins feeds right into them.
And you could be right. The Packers, obviously, I am not saying the Vikings should be the favorite to win this division, but I am saying plus
the price. You like
plus 300 or even plus 250 or better is just outrageous, because I think the gap closed this offseason between these 2 teams. I think the Vikings have a real shot here if they stay healthy.
Okay. We'll see. Andrew Tanzi's Vikings. You heard it here.
You already know what I'm betting week 1.
All right. Do you have any left to say on them?
Nope.
All right. Moving on to the Detroit Lions. Win total is at 6.5. The over is at -115. Plus 400 to make the playoffs, 10-1 to win the division. They do have a new offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. No other major changes to the coaching staff. They added wide receiver DJ Chark to be their number 2, in addition to drafting Jamison Williams out of Alabama, who's obviously dealing with an injury. There have been kind of reports all over the place. He's going to be back by training camp. He's going to miss the first few weeks. So we'll see. Also drafted defensive end Aiden Hutchinson, number 2 overall. And then they did lose Trey Flowers as a defensive end on the D-line. Are you what's your temperature on the Lions here? Are you high on them, low on them, just kind of exist in a neutral state? What are you feeling? It's
weird because when we prepare for these podcasts and I dig into my futures, I kind of have, I see the lines. I'm like, all right, here's where I am on the lines. And I expected to be a little higher on them. And then when I dug into, what they did in the offseason, the numbers, I couldn't get there. So I know you're a little bit higher on them than me. It's more, I can be a little bit excited about the offense. There's a new play caller, obviously, in Ben Johnson. So it'll be, that the offense was a disaster. They had Anthony Lynn calling the plays, and then Dan Campbell took over.
That never goes well.
Yeah. So it just, yeah, exactly. So that was bad. But you can say a lot of positives about the offense. They have pretty good skill position guys. It's really the defensive side of the ball that kind of turned me off. They just really didn't make any big upgrades outside of Hutchinson in the draft. And look, he's a rookie, so how much of an impact do we expect him to have? He could have a good season. I'm not saying he can't, but
he's number 2 overall pick. Like, look at what Micah Parsons did last year. It was a huge difference on that Cowboys defense.
Yeah, I agree. But they allowed 5.9 yards per play last year. They allowed the most yards per pass in the league at 7.6. You have Jeff Okudah coming off an Achilles, and he really, what did he play? 1 or 2 games last year? He missed, I think, half his rookie season. So your number 1 corner, for all intents and purposes, might as well still be a rookie. He hasn't had any time to develop, and he's coming off an Achilles injury, which obviously is not an easy injury to come off of, especially at the cornerback position. So I think the offense has potential. They only won 3 games last year, but they were 11-6 against the spread. So we know this team was one that fought in every game, and they arguably could have won 5 or 6 games with the way some of those games went at the end. But I just really cannot find one redeemable stat or move this team made on the defensive side of the ball. And I look up and down their schedule. I'm just having their win total at 6.5. I'm really just having trouble finding 7 wins. I mean, even the games that you look at, okay, like the Seahawks, that's not a sure win. The Jets, it's not a sure win. I mean, you have the Bears twice in the division. The Bears, I expect to be, one of the bottom
Commanders, 3. The Giants, the Jaguars, the Panthers. There's so many of them. Yes, their schedule's cupcakes.
But for a team like the Lions, like
they're not going to win all of them.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the Packers and you see it, like, okay, yeah, the Jets are a win. The Bears are a win. With the Lions, it's like, okay, they might win a few of these. So when you have like 6 or 7 of those games on the schedule, like, you basically need them to win almost every one of them and then steal another game or 2 from a team that's
what
clearly
I was
better.
I feel like the Lions are a kind of team where you can trust them to steal a couple games from, they can be a pesky underdog. They can take down the Vikings, the Eagles, the Dolphins. Like, I think those teams in that next year, like, I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to beat the Packers or the Bills, but I think those teams in that next tier where maybe they're going to be 6 or 7 point underdogs, I think they could win some of those games because they almost did that last year. They ended up losing every single one of them at the gun.
But 4 more wins. We're talking about, like, I could be on board if it was like, another win or 2, but 4 more wins to cash the over on their win total. I don't know, man. It's not like they brought in like big time guys or made a bit. Like, they made a few small changes here and there, but it's not nothing overworldly to do a complete 180. I mean, we're talking about what, a 7-10 record. I mean, I don't know. I don't see it.
All right, here's my case for the Lions. I bet they're over win total. Now, the juice was way different when I bet it. I bet it over 6.5 at plus 120. Now that it's at like minus 115, it's getting a little dicey. I still think they're going to win 7 or 8 games, but it's getting a little dicey. So here's what I'm seeing. So off the top, they have the 5th easiest schedule in the league, plus 11 net rest advantage, which is 2nd in the league. It's a favorable schedule. Like we just talked about, they have a lot of winnable games. You're not going to count on a team like the Lions to win all of them, but there's going to be a lot of games where at least the spread is within a field goal either way. I think this offense is going to be really good. I think Jared Goff is a serviceable NFL quarterback. You obviously have Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift. That's a good backfield. And then the receiving core, a full year of the sun god himself, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who obviously came on towards the end of the season, was awesome. DJ Chark can take over as the wide receiver 2 while Jamison Williams kind of rehabs his injury. But I think once Williams is back in, that's going to be a pretty solid receiving core. And then obviously TJ Hawkinson's one of the better tight ends in the league. I also saw some really good things about their offensive line. PFF was projecting them to actually have a top 5 offensive line, which seems a little bit high to me, but you still, Taylor Decker missed a lot of last season, year 2 of Penei Sewell, who they drafted in the top 10 last year. The problem for me is the defense. I think you're going to need Jeff Okudah, like you mentioned. He's coming off of basically 2 seasons where he barely played, and when he did, he wasn't very good. You're going to need to see some of that potential that caused you to draft a number 3 overall in 2020 coming out of Ohio State, because they're in desperate need of a number 1 corner. Like, I think Aiden Hutchinson helps the pass rush a lot, but their secondary is pretty brutal. So I think that's my one concern. The other thing, we have been talking a lot about 1-score games on this podcast. The Lions were 1-6 in 1-score games last year. So I think that's a stat where you can see maybe if they win 1 or 2 of those other games, they lost at the wire. Maybe if Justin Tucker doesn't make a 69-yard field goal or whatever the heck it was, it could have been a little bit different of the season. So I think the over 6.5 is good. I liked it more at plus money than it is now. I would not bet them to win the division. I don't think they can quite make the playoffs. But yeah, I like the win total over.
Oh man, I couldn't disagree more. It's if I need a team to win,
you'd bet the under.
If I need a team to win 4 more games than last year, I need something big in the offseason. There just wasn't anything. Like this is like the Broncos getting Russell Wilson type jump, like from 3 to 7 wins. I
mean, what do you think the Vikings are doing this season? Even if you think they're going to win the division with 9 wins, like you're kind of betting on them to have like 3 more wins to win the division.
But I bet their win total over 8.5. Like they won 8 games last year. So I
was talking more about the division. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the division. I think they could win. Like I don't think it's unrealistic for them to win 10 games and win the division.
I think you're gonna need 11 with the Packers.
I mean, that's fine, but regardless, it's not. We're not talking about as big of a jump from the Lions here. Yeah, it's. I mean, even if we're saying they have 8 winnable games on their schedule, how many do we really expect them to win? Like, you think they win 6 of those 8 winnable?
They have
games?
more than winnable games on the schedule. Home against the Eagles, home against the Commanders.
Okay, I'm talking like when I say winnable, I mean teams that are kind of in that same tier as them. So I consider the Eagles a tier above Detroit.
I mean, they're only 4-point dogs though. I mean, I guess, all right, fine. Like, it's not like they're like 10-point underdog. All right. So Commanders, Seahawks,
yeah.
Home against the Dolphins, at the Bears, home against the Bears, at the Giants, home against the Jaguars, home against the Vikings, at the Jets, at the Panthers.
Okay, I will disagree with the Vikings and Panthers. Okay,
I think the Panthers are. Don't give me that. The Panthers are very much in their division.
I don't think they're in the same tier. I think they're slightly above them. All right, so if we include them, then what are we at?
The Panthers win 6 games last year.
And what are we at? 8?
That was 9. 9 if you get rid of the Vikings but keep the Panthers.
All right, so we'll say 9. So I don't see them win. I could see 5 games. I think 5 winning 5 of those
6
games.
6 out of those 9, they shock one good team. Boom, okay. 7.
All right. I disagree, but it's just too big of a jump.
Okay. Anything left to say?
No.
All right. Let's see if we can find a team that we both agree on. I present you with the Chicago Bears. A 6.5 win total. The over is at plus 105, also plus 400 to make the playoffs, and they are 14-1 to win the division. Big changes in the offseason. Matt Nagy is gone. New head coach Matt Eberflus coming in, the former Colts defensive coordinator. Also new offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, who was the Packers quarterback coach. He will replace Bill Lazor and hopefully develop Justin Fields a little bit better than the prior regime did. In terms of their players, not looking good from a roster construction standpoint. They lost arguably their top 3 players on the whole roster: wide receiver Allen Robinson, defensive end Khalil Mack, and defensive tackle Akeem Hicks. They also lost tight end Jimmy Graham. And all they added was wide receiver Byron Pringle, and then had 0 picks in the first round. So not great
because of the trade they made for Khalil Mack is why they had 0 picks in the first round too.
And then they got rid of him. Yeah.
Yes.
That went well. Okay. Where are you at on the Chicago Bears? Can we agree that this is a bad team?
I mean, bad is an understatement. Okay. There is not, I mean, you're looking, so you mentioned the PFF rankings, 31st offensive line ranked by PFF, 31st defensive line ranked by PFF. It's like they don't want to give Justin Fields a chance. This was an offensive line that allowed the most sacks in the league last year. Fields was just under fire every time he was in there. They trade away his number 1 target. They bring in a defensive head coach. It's like it feels like they just punted on this entire season already. And I think once we get in week 6, we're going to be seeing some pretty hefty double-digit spreads for this team because, you know, when you're going to be getting outmatched in the trenches every single week, your quarterback's really not like, it wasn't one of those seasons for where it was like a rookie quarterback. He had a rough year, but it's like, oh, I saw some flashes. I saw some potential. Fields was just awful. I mean,
there were some plays.
I mean, some plays he made with his legs. Yeah, he had maybe one good game later in the season, but man, I mean, I don't know. Look, they brought over Luke Getsy as an offensive coordinator who's been working with Aaron Rodgers the last few years. So I guess that's one positive, but this is just an uninspiring roster. And Oh man, and look, the thing is, like, if Fields is doing as bad as he was last year, there's no Andy Dalton or Foles to fall back on. It's Trevor Siemian or Nathan Peterman.
I mean, they got to let Fields, even if he's the worst quarterback in the league, they just got to let him play through it. I mean, there's no turning back.
Yeah, so I was happy to bet the under 6.5 wins on this team, and I also took a little bit on plus 1,100 for them to have the worst record in the league, because I think they could be worse than the Texans. I honestly think Davis Mills is a better quarterback than Justin Fields. So I don't think I think that, and who the other teams they were priced around, like it was like the Panthers in there, and I forget they were just way. They should have been in the top 2 or 3 for worse record, and they weren't. So I think that's a pretty good bet.
Yeah. So all right. So the positives on this team, because I mean, there are some positives. You do have a quarterback heading into year 2. So Fields could take another step.
But he can't though. Like, what do they like? You have
I was just trying
Mooney
to give some
Byron
positives
Pringle,
before I said their whole team sucks. I was just going to give them a few. Here you go. They have an easy schedule. They have plus 7 days of rest advantage. But yeah, the roster's horrible, and they can't win any games because they can't score any points.
Like they're in Houston week 3. Like they could end. They play San Fran and then Green Bay. They could easily get blown out of the water by both those teams. We could be looking at the Houston Texans as a field goal favorite in week 3.
Yeah, and so they're
forced to bet the Bears.
We're not going to be forced to bet the Bears. Their current skill position players are Darnell Mooney, Byron Pringle, Tajay Sharp, Equanimous St. Brown, and Cole Kmet. And then obviously David Montgomery running the ball behind the worst offensive line in the league. Like, how are they ever scoring more than 17 points in a game? Pick 6, maybe.
Yeah, and the pass protection, like that's the biggest concern. I mean, the Fields didn't even have a chance last year on some of his dropbacks. I mean, it was literally get the snap and you have 2 guys in your face.
Their current leader on the depth chart at right tackle is a 5th-round pick out of Southern Utah. So it sounds like they're going to be going pretty well.
Yeah, so I think the only thing this team is going to be competing for is the number 1 pick this year.
Yeah, and similar to your Bears' worst record in the league, I also bet the Bears to score the least points in the NFL, which was plus 900 on Bet Rivers. They finished 27th out of 32 teams last year, but I think a lot of the teams behind them got better. The Jaguars' new coach, Travis Etienne, and Christian Kirk coming in. The Giants hired Dable. Panthers got a big upgrade at quarterback. Jets drafted Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, actually trying to help their quarterback, and the Bears got rid of all their players that were good. So I think they're definitely live to have the least points scored in the league, and I thought they were going to be lower than plus 900.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find 7 wins on this schedule, I you deserve an award, because I do not see it. Like I said, I expect them to be underdogs to Houston. Who are they going to be favorites? I mean, maybe
for home against the Lions.
Yeah, what do you think? Like 1.5, 2?
Yeah, that's what.
But who knows? By week 10,
home against the Texans.
If your Lions are undefeated like you think they're going to be, they won't be.
At the Falcons will probably be close spread.
I can't see them being road favorites against anyone.
I don't think they'll be favorites, but I think it'll be under a field goal. I mean, it's not pretty. At the Jets will probably be under a field goal. Would you consider them? So I found on DraftKings Bears to finish last in the NFC North. I guess part of this depends on how high you are on the Lions, but that's currently a plus 130. I'm personally high on the Lions, so I bet that. Would you consider that as someone who's more in the middle on the Lions?
Yeah, I even with me being in the middle on the Lions, I think they are. Yeah, like the Bears are in contention for, like, I bet them for worst record, because I think there's a very good chance they are the worst team in the NFL.
Yeah, or maybe we even look at, I know they just started releasing some like alternate win totals, at least on DraftKings. I don't think they have them on FanDuel yet. Let me see what the Bears alternate under 5.5 was. So I think I was looking at that earlier. So right now the under 5.5 is plus 160 on DraftKings. I think it's like plus 175 on Barstool. And I think when I was at least going through their schedule, I was only at like 4 or 5 wins, honestly. So I think under 5.5, it really good plus money.
And what's under 4.5?
They only have the one up and one down right now. But I mean,
Okay.
Eventually you'll probably get a 4.5 at like plus 240, plus 250 maybe.
Yeah, but once you start going under 4.5, I think you're better off taking a shot at them that worst record.
Yeah, if you're getting triple the odds.
Yeah. Oh man, this is gonna be. I was looking last year and I'm like, how did this team win 6 games? But then I'm like,
that's the thing, because they won 6 games and like their win total is basically the same range. You have, I don't know.
But then I remember they had Dalton to fall back on, who I'm not saying is
they also
great,
had a moron of a head coach. I mean,
like they won their last 3 wins. They won with Dalton, they won with Foles, they won with Dalton, and Fields had 3 wins earlier in the season. So
yeah.
And they beat the they beat the Bengals. Detroit.
They beat the Bengals? How the heck did that happen?
In week 2.
Jeez. Imagine that.
The Bears were 3-2 earlier in the season, and then they just collapsed. Yeah. I mean, they beat the Giants, who in week 17. So that means Fromm was quarterback. Yeah. So yeah, 6 games, but
not a good team.
And they got worse. Like they got worse in the offseason.
Objectively worse.
Yes. And I don't know what. Like I just don't understand. It just feels like they really do not want Justin Fields to succeed. It was a weird head coaching hire. I thought that right away. Like it just, I feel for him because
someone in that organization does not believe in Justin Fields one bit, because they're doing everything they can to just tank for another quarterback.
No, and you could see him just feeling dejected on the sidelines last year in a lot of these games where, I mean, you hope that with a new offensive coordinator, they at least start design. It felt like they were running the same offense with Fields, Dalton, and Foles. Hopefully now they've had an offseason, new coaching staff to at least design the offense around Fields. But there's only so much you can do behind one of the worst offensive lines and skill position units in the league. So, So Bears worst team in the league in play.
All right. Can I interest you in a couple props here before we close it out?
Sure.
So while we're bagging on Justin Fields here, how do you feel about, because this one started to move a little bit. I have the under 3,500 passing yards at -110 on PointsBet. So we just talked about how brutal this offense looks. In 10 starts last year, Fields averaged 187 pass yards per game. In order to hit the over, he would need to average 206. Obviously, we have worse weapons. No Allen Robinson, no Jimmy Graham. And averaging 206 per game assumes that he plays all 17 games, when in reality, he's a mobile quarterback playing behind the worst offensive line of the league. He did suffer cracked ribs in the Baltimore game last year, ended up missing 2 games. So if you see something similar this year, even if he misses 2 to 3 games, I think this is an easy under. And I know 3,500 seems super low in today's NFL. It's actually not that unrealistic. So for reference, only 18 quarterbacks have surpassed 3,500 yards in each of the last 2 seasons. So there's some injuries built into that, but essentially you're not necessarily betting on him to be like the 32nd best quarterback in the league to cash that. Like realistically, he could finish as like the 26th best quarterback and still only throw for 3,300 yards in this offense. So I thought it was a little bit high.
Yeah, it's definitely high, and you took the words out of my mouth. Like with the injury thing, when you're playing behind this bad of an offensive line, he's going to get hit
nonstop.
You're going to be getting sacked 5+ times a game, plus all the times he's going to have to be running. So there is a pretty, I'd say, above average chance that he does get injured. And I don't see, like, this team, this is an offense to me that they're just not going to be able to stay on the field. You're going to get your occasional splash play to Darnell Mooney where there's broken coverages in the secondary that'll be big plays and look good in Fields' box score. But consistently and playing against good defenses, I don't see how this team's going to be moving the ball. And outside of Darnell Mooney, we're just not talking about any other big play guys or anyone that can really get consistent separation. So yeah, it's not a recipe for Fields to have a big statistical year. So I was betting his unders almost weekly from a game by game perspective last year. So yeah, I definitely like the season long under. And if week 1 we're getting his yards over, like kind of in that 206 range, I'll be happy to take the under.
Yeah, against the Niners, that pass rush. Good luck.
Yeah. What's the spread on that game? 6.5?
Yeah, currently 6.5. The Niners currently don't have a quarterback, but
yeah, I was getting on you for betting week 1 games last podcast we recorded, and now I have like 3 or 4 bets, and it's just you go down a rabbit hole.
You're already telling me the Bears might be double-digit dogs by week 4, and I was telling you last week to bet the Giants against them in week 3.
It's funny, you know what? When I re-listened to the podcast, I heard that I was like, man. I think I actually do really
Doesn't
like
it
that.
make sense? How can they be rated the same on a neutral field?
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. So yeah, that's funny you say it because I was listening to it in my car and I was like, man,
Look at that.
Yeah. But still, there's something about betting a week 4. Was that what it is? Week 4? That's
something like that. Week 3 or 4.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But I definitely have some week 1 bets in.
All right. You have any bets left to give out?
Nope.
All right. I think I'll save my offensive player of the year bets for when we go through the individual award markets.
A little teaser there.
Yes. Did a whole breakdown on the market, the past winners. I think I have some good ones there.
All right.
Well, we will be back next week. What division are we going to do next?
NFC South.
I thought we were waiting on something. Oh, no, we were waiting on the NFC West.
We were waiting on the Panthers, too.
Yeah, we got the Panthers now. All right, so we'll be back next week with the NFC South. We'll break down the Bucks, Saints, Panthers, and Falcons. For now, this will be all. So we'll talk to you guys next time. Any questions, comments, or concerns, hit us up on Twitter at BetRightPod. Smash the like button on YouTube. From Jeff and Rue, we are the Bet Right Sports Betting Podcast, because every time you bet with us, you bet right.